Afternoon and welcome to today's edition of the Citizens Chat on CivicSpaceTV. I am Phillip Muliisa. Today we have a cocktail of subjects to talk about, but what is guiding our conversation is a topic that reads prospects for personal and national security amidst ADF killings and the attempted assassination of Pastor Aloysius Bugingo. Now, joining me to detail the discussion, including the presidential address that happened on the 9th, the NAM summit that is happening in the country, but also G77 in Uganda, is a panel of distinguished citizens of this country whom I will introduce. Starting with my extreme left is retired Major Awich Pollar from the National Resistance Movement. Major, you're most welcome, official.
Thank you so much, and greeting to our viewers from myself, but also greetings from the mighty NRM.
Thank you, the mighty NRM, for being here. Next to Major is from the Center for Constitutional Governance, the Executive Director, Dr. Sarah Bireete. Doctor, you're most welcome, official.
Thank you, and good afternoon, viewers.
And last but not least is Dr. Robert Ojambo from Kyambogo University, the head of the Faculty of Political Science and History. Doctor, you're most welcome, official.
Thank you, Philip. Good afternoon, viewers.
Thank you. Now, dear viewers, on the 9th, the president came out to talk to the public, and his guiding topic was ADF. ADF has killed very many Ugandans. 3 people on the 25th of December 2023. We remember the killing of Major Chigundu was linked to ADF. The killing of students in Kasese district, about 43 or 44 of them died. ADF and many other people. And I want to ask, starting with you, Major Awich, the president says not once, not twice, not thrice that the UPDF has crushed and has won the battle against the ADF. But they keep resurfacing, they keep killing Ugandans, they keep killing Congolese. Which ADF has been defeated and which ADF is still in existence?
Well, thank you so much. But there's something running in my mind as you did the introduction. There has been appointments of commissioners to the Electoral Commission. That position has been vacant, and a lot of talk has been going around as to why the appointing authorities should leave such a sensitive place vacant, or more so should let the office holders who are proceeding illegally proceed. But today, the appointments are out. And I was thinking about Dr. Ojambo, because there's also a doctor from the academic world who landed there. Maybe next time my young brother here will learn on the same thing.
Dr. Simba.
So you never can tell. Next time is him. And do you know the beauty of that kind of appointment is that you nearly get a 14-year job. If you are 53, that means you are going to be 70, and you'll definitely retire. So, doctor, I pray for you.
There is one position still vacant.
There?
Yes.
For a commissioner?
They've appointed only for one position is still kept.
So, I thought you wanted the governor, Bank of Uganda.
So
it has been vacant for 2 years.
Maybe since you talk about it, maybe you could briefly share with us, why does it take the president and the people around him a very long time to appoint people to these positions? You know, the contract's expired and...
Yeah, sometimes you need, as appointing authority, you need to take a closer look and study very well very competent persons, because these people are handling very delicate decisions that can throw the country into a constitutional crisis. So many of the appointments are sensitive and you need to study.
Thank you. Maybe just briefly, because the Constitution says that in case of reappointment, the president must reappoint existing commissioners 3 months before their terms expire. Now he did not meet that threshold. The likes of Yabakam and rest should have been reappointed 3 months before, 7th January. Their term expired, they even left office. So the reappointment of former commissioners can be contested because that time had lapsed.
Thank
Well,
you.
that one is a matter of law, and as he puts it, I think the Attorney General need to study, because he's citing a provision. Maybe there are other provisions where the legal advisors, Attorney General being the advisor of government, could have been alive to that fact, but needs a study.
Okay, Major, let's come back to ADF.
Yeah, we'll come back to ADF after having prayed for doctor. Is that ADF, I don't know whether it's ADF or somewhere else, the declaration of finishing a rebel group is made, but it's not that easy to ascertain it, because I had said earlier that there are two types of war. There's a conventional war and there's the guerrilla war. The conventional war, like since First World War, Second World War, and others, is that you control a territory. You know that we have, like for example, the conventional war of Uganda and Tanzania during Amin's regime. You know you have captured Masaka. You continue to Mpiji. You continue to Kampala. You take over Kampala. In fact, in the olden days, you put your flag to show that this territory is under me. So it is geographically demarcated, you know, the front line. But with a guerrilla organization, it's difficult to really ascertain that you are finished. And I am not so sure the packaging of the statement of the president, whether he said he had finished or he said we have
The president
weakened
says
them.
we have defeated ADF.
Okay, defeating doesn't mean finishing. Defeating means you have made them not to attain an objective, because every fighting force has an objective. So if they have not got that objective, in this case, the intelligence would have known their objective. If the objective is to slowly, say, change from a guerrilla stage to controlling territories, so defeat is measured by how much you take to make an opponent not achieve the goal. But it is different from finishing, because as I said, you cannot for certainty declare a guerrilla warfare having finished an opponent, because a guerrilla, even two, can show their presence, can show their activity, either way of planting a bomb or by way of attack.
Thank you, Major, for that. But I want to come to you, Dr. Sarah, here. The president came with former ADF warriors, soldiers, some girls during this interview, and they gave their account of how they joined ADF and how they've been in the bush for over 10 years. Were you convinced that these are, one, former ADF soldiers, but two, that UPDF is now in control and ADF is no longer a threat to Uganda?
Well, I think for ADF, there is no need for the president to parade people in order to convince citizens. ADF has been here killing people since the burning of Chwamba Technical Institute in Western Uganda. More than 20 years of insurgency by ADF. Nobody discounts or contests its existence. And so I don't know what prompted the president to carry those young women to TV. Two things emerged out of the testimonies of the young women. One of them said she was kidnapped 13 years ago in a drone. 13 years ago takes us to 2011, 2012. The terminology of a drone emerged only in 2021. Nobody was referring to any vehicle as a drone in 2011,
No.
2012. So that testimony is false. There was no such vehicle known as a drone. The second issue that emerged, you know, for me, it was the appearance and demeanor of these ladies. Somebody says they've lived in a forest for 13 years. but they look more fresh and polished than myself and other ladies. A person who lives in the forest, their skin is known. You can tell that this person has been living in a forest, the effect of the vagaries of weather, the effect of no proper shelter, no proper feeding, cannot go away in a month or two.
Running around,
yes,
not settled.
So a person who has lived in a forest for 13 months cannot be rehabilitated in a month to look like a princess. It is not possible. So I found these elements disturbing, and myself, I'm not convinced, and I don't see why the president carried those women in his address, because what they said could lead one to think that maybe some of the activities are stage managed, because we know the agencies who use drones. So if these girls are being carried in drones, then one could think that it's a continuation of kidnaps going on in the country by state agencies.
Thank you, Doctor. I want to engage Dr. Robert here on that very issue. One of the things military people do, especially governments, when they're going forward, is to make sure the people in the country are with them. They're in support of what they are doing. For example, the UPDF in the Congo, Ugandans need to support it. By the president bringing out people who are part of ADF, he's looking for support, not so.
Yeah, thank you so much, Philip. ADF thing has become mystical in Uganda. I've said here, it is a mysterious thing to one extent that when you think that ADF has ended, that's when something big happens, and then there is a lot of stories about it. At the end of the day, the people were with the president in fighting against the ADF, especially after the attack that Sarah here mentioned at Kichwamba. Everybody thought that these are people who are supposed to be dealt with all the force that it requires. But over time, stories emerging up about UPDF have caused, ADF, have caused some doubt in some class of the citizenry, especially those who do some critical thinking. For example, I also agree with Sarah. I don't think whoever is advising the president to do certain things that he does is really giving him wrong advice. Because after all, if people have been saved from a kidnap or whatever, they are supposed to be protected. Yes. They are not supposed to be paraded all over the place. Now, for example, who is going to marry those ladies if they know very well that these are former people who are kidnapped? In fact, like Sarah, I was also perplexed by how these guys were talking. They looked like a coached group who were just giving some form of comedy. For example, one girl said, and Sarah, you were not very lucky they were speaking Swahili. So one of them said that he was kidnapped when he was 7 years. 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 7. And in the next year, she got pregnant.
Yes.
And I said, since when did the kids start getting pregnant? At 7 years. It beats biology. This is a special killed is like Virginie Mary. As 8 years is not possible. I try to read about it and try to see whether an 8-year-old kid can get pregnant. And it is not very easy. And for what purpose is this being said on TV? Then the other issue was the time they are finished in the bush. And comparing it with coming out today. Oh, my friend, if you have been in the bush for 13 years, you used to see the Konyi abductees. I have one of my colleague there was just abducted for a few months. But the time she was coming back home, she had to go through very serious rehabilitation, including taking her abroad for treatment. So you asked me a question. The people have been with the government, and I think they are still with them. But sometimes, as I normally say, sometimes things in Uganda are very funny. For example, the bombs blast at a time when a supplementary is being required to take soldiers to Congo. Sometimes people are killed in Mubende because the police is looking for an additional budget in their affairs, and so on and so forth. So I did not really understand why the president was parading these people. But it goes back to what I've been saying, that the president these days speaks when he wants. And for those who listen to the speech, I want you to disagree with me. He did not speak about anything new. He was just re-echoing what he had already said on the New Year's Eve. And only that now, this time he added in some comedy. And I saw him also sometimes he was in disbelief, was not agreeing with what these women, but I think his movie was not moving as directed.
Thank you, Dr. Robert. Thank you. Now, we are joined by the Honorable Joseph Ochieno from the Uganda People's Congress. Honorable, you most welcome to the show.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for welcoming into this program. But thank you for welcoming into part of a comedy. But I just want to wish guys a better hope for better new year.
Yes, yeah. I want to engage you. The president kept referring to how the ADF was protected by Bashir in Sudan, President Bashir, and then mentioning the late President Mobutu and President Kabila. Does mentioning
but all of them are no longer in power, so he's protecting them. What is the relevance of that information?
Yes, the relevance, but also President Kabila is still alive, and so is President Bashir. What does that mean for our relations with the people in the Congo who could be still believing in President Kabila, but also Sudan?
You know, it's Museveni's careless talks that landed us into the mess in which now we are with the backlash over the anti-homosexuality legislation. Forget about the decisions, but just the talk. Mr. Museveni speaks like a spoiled kid. And in a way, because he's had so much of his way since the 1960s, that he thinks he can still go ahead and manipulate conversations, manipulate people, manipulate public opinion in this country, and sometimes manipulate global opinion and get away with it. But because it has predominantly worked for him, I'm not quite sure he necessarily cares. I think Robert was questioning who advises Mr. Museveni. To the best of our knowledge in this panel, but I don't know, but to the best of our knowledge, Mr. Museveni advises himself. And the advisors around Mr. Museveni are officially people who are there to eat our money rather than to advise Mr. Museveni. And even then, possibly people who would give him advice is very unlikely that person will take, because this is a very commonsensical thing. For somebody who was very lucky, unlike you, who was very lucky at a very early stage, at least 23 or thereabout, was working in president's office, in an organized president's office. Even if he, after working in nobody's office for 2-3 years, just even if merely as an intern, and then you fade off and then you go and look after your long-horned cattle somewhere in the borders of Tanzania and come back, become a president, go to State House, and hang out there for about a week, just being inducted by officials, civil servants. You'd know how to have conversations about some of these other things, as you rightly say, how to address questions of diplomacy, questions of finesses around sensitivities around security. No, we don't know why Mr. Museveni chose to waste the airtime of Uganda on that day to basically focus on ADF. Part of the conversation has always been actually in the last several days in response to his speech. That was it necessarily the speech about ADF starting a new year? I didn't know the other part of your conversation. I was still preparing myself, thanks to Mr. Museveni's incompetence on infrastructure. That meant I came in slightly later on this program. The priorities for this country, you would ask, is security. Yes, ADF is one of them, but it's not the most urgent. But that he chose that for whatever reason, he's possibly addressing an audience and an interest. Will it necessarily matter? I think it does matter, except I think to his luck, and maybe that's where we as Ugandans are lucky. Washington knows him, London knows him. Those are he's their boy, and within the region, people know him. So they've now learned to manage to live with him. So possibly they're just not going to take him seriously. Unfortunately, the image for us as a country, as Uganda, is not particularly good. But the more important thing, particularly for Congo, which seems to be the bigger likely center for all possibilities of rebellion, and perhaps even going forward, I'm giving them free contextual advice. I'm not quite sure whether Congo, of all our regional neighbors, should be the country that you would necessarily want to antagonize. But because it's lucky, Kabila is alive, but perhaps Kabila may not necessarily be in power tomorrow. So I think it was a strategic error mentioning those. But again, if they're alive, why doesn't he have conversations with these people? Mr. Museveni was basically speaking to us. I think because last year was a failure on security, and I've told your program here that 2023 was the year when the security card that Museveni has been playing since 1986, that he brought security from Luweero Kabamba bushes, ADF and others have made him naked, and even the people who have attacked some of these people, the Katumbas, and in fact even the killing of the minister, although it was by a local bodyguard, tells you that this is a mythical thing, because at the end of the day, the role of the state is to protect us. And if you even to fail to protect me and make sure that people are not able to jump over the fence, you fail on that. So it's not a card that you can no longer use.
But Mr. Moderator, yes. You normally concentrate our security on ADF.
Yeah.
The people we speak to here, majority of them do not know even what ADF in full is. They have their issues that really affect them as far as security is concerned. This month alone, if you have been following the media, you should have seen a number of things where machete-wielding people are cutting people in villages. And in Kampala here, it is even worse. In the areas of Namugongo, in the areas of Nansana, in most of these suburbs in Kampala. Now going back at home late is very dangerous because people wait for you at the gate. And now they don't care. Those days people used to think that when they're in vehicles, they are safe. Now they just bang the windscreens and they will cut you in pieces. In Namugongo, I am aware of about 4 cases where people have been cut. In fact, a lady even lost life the other week, last week there. And these are issues that are really showing that the security situation is deteriorating. And you introduced very well, especially personal security. Because ADF in a bigger picture threatens state security. But personal security wherever people are. For example, I've always asked myself, what is the role of the police in maintaining law and order? Has it changed? Because police posts those days were given according to the number of people in an area. I can give you an example. In the whole of Namugongo, there is no police post, not even one. There is just a small one in Chalwajala and another small one at the church to protect the Catholic shrine. In Namugongo and in Chalwajala, there are about 3 or 4 guys in that post. So if you went there, in most cases, you only go there to get a reference number. But to follow up a matter, you are wasting your time. So my view is that these days, police, for example, has been so much taken to protect the state operators and the officials. So much so that the local man does not have police on him. Those days, we used to have LDUs, local defense unit, to help in the security. These ones were disbanded and some of them were taken to police. They have also now, in fact, LDUs, there is no difference between LDU and UPDF. The ones who used to be LDU now are putting on UPDF uniform. And they are doing UPDF work, which is not maintaining law and order. So if you look at the big picture, I think the Ministry of Internal Affairs need to re-examine itself and find out whether it is performing the role that is given to it, as my friend there normally wants to concentrate on the Constitution, to maintain law and order, which translates into keeping people and their property. Thieves, these thieves in these days in these rural areas, you cannot keep goats, you cannot keep chicken and these other things if you don't have very good security. And yet, this operation wealth creation, parish model, and what have you is encouraging to an extent of people stealing pigs. Pigs are one of the most difficult things to steal. But these days, you read stories and pigs are being stolen. So I really think that we need to re-examine this personal security. So security should not only be limited that is Uganda safe and therefore the Ugandan state. And there, Major will tell you, yes, they are safe. The state operators are safe. They are flying on these roads with the 3 bodyguards, 5 bodyguards. If you need the sharpshooters, they give you. But what about the local person like me? Who is protecting me? For example, I ask a question. If I have a problem in Namgongo, which police post do I go to? The more serious one is Kira Police, which is 3 kilometers from where I stay. So in that way, so thieves can come in my house, tell me to give them whatever to give them, and even use me to carry up to where they want it to be, and nothing will happen.
Thank you.
If you don't mind, I just because it was my question, and I just want to conclude it.
Those interventions are long. Really,
but this is
really,
this is
moderator.
This is citizen discourse. No, no. I just want to thank
Give him a
Robert
chance
for
to
contextualizing this, and Comrade Rich can have my extra 1 minute on this. That is extremely important, the broadening question of security. And people need to get this. That is exactly why Mr. Museveni is playing onto this thing. Because not only is this, as he's talk about the thieves, including here on the Northern Bypass, but if I may say so, you cannot talk about national security and that you brought peace, and you have deputy ministers having 20, highly trained police officers at our expenses. So that means, that's the point I was trying to tell you, that this thing has been demystified. And the more we talk about security, so talk about it like that and say, oh, now we are peaceful. But no, it's a myth.
Thank you so much. Major Awich, you sit in the External Affairs Office of the NRM party, and every time we talk about ADF, we involve the country of Democratic Republic of Congo, Uganda, sometimes Southern Sudan. When the president keeps referring to former presidents, like mere individuals who are making only mistakes in their countries and refusing him to enter those countries, is it a safe position for the NRM?
It is. But I like to make some comments about this, then I'll answer your question whether it is a safe comment for NRM, which I've already answered anyway, but I will explain. There's a comment about the issue of the drone, which were mentioned by the girls. The issue of the drone came to be coined as such in the years that it is said. But it does not iron out facts which could have happened. And to us in the party, we have always argued the state actors that you have the mandate to arrest a suspect, police or whatever, you have the mandate to arrest. We have always told them, please identify yourself and carry out arrest. You have a right to. Because we have always argued, suppose wrong people come and do the way you are doing, and now these sentiments are coming. How will you know? We have always urged them that it is good for the state as well. Because if people come with no number plates and arrest on the street, suppose also wrong people come and do the same. So it is not that since the coinage of drone came at a given time, you can't rule out activities that had happened at some particular time. So this is possible that at that time, after all, the term drone was just put on a particular type of cars. And we know that these cars have always existed in our roads.
So which car kidnapped
Maybe for clarity, Major,
which car
does
transported
the
the
government
girl?
of NRM have those cars called drones?
Of course.
No, it has been seen that some state operatives have been using the Kamunye type of cars, and those are the kind of cars that have been termed drones. In some instances, you remember it used to be used to pick leaders in a demonstration. The idea was that leaders, first they were thrown behind a pickup, you remember?
The terrible
and
thing.
it became so embarrassing. So government said, no, don't embarrass them. Put them in this apparently gentle looking cars. Yeah, and of course, you know, everything that you do, however good intention, people will always make the negative part of it. But the idea of a drone came after the arrest of demonstration leaders, which looked crude by dropping them on a pickup. And these guys would enjoy. Some of them were put in that kind of the so-called drone and driven to their homes in the comfort of that car. But later on, as the usage came up, it came to be known as drone operated by state operatives. The other, so I wanted to make that clarification. The other aspect I wanted to make clarification is why the president carried the girls. You see, if you notice, like some of us who have grown in NRA with President Museveni, his method of communication is not rhetoric. They are rhetoric leaders who can appeal to emotions in a properly organized, structured speech. There was one who used to be a friend to Karl Marx, and you know Karl Marx is a genius. This guy divided the workers' movement, the socialists, into two. You know, to divide somebody from Karl Marx, such a genius, you must be also good. But the man, they said, was such a good rhetoric speech maker that had he asked his audience to cut off their throats, they would have done it. But President Museveni is not a rhetoric speech maker that would persuade you to cut your throat. This method is talk with facts and dialectical argument. That is why, even in the army, for example, if you came to a battalion and soldiers were complaining about food or medicine, Museveni's approach would be, admin officer, can you explain this? Medical officer, what do you say? So he wants a factual approach of things. Even in districts where they used to complain about chief administrative officers, Museveni will ask the chief administrative officer, come forward, explain this. So it is these methods of communication on factual realities compared to the rhetoric of speech makers that made him come with the girls to say, please speak for yourself.
But you see, Major, you are talking about young girls of 20, 23, 25. They still have a life to live. They also have their security.
You see, even in proceedings in judicial office or judicial proceedings, those offered protection are those below 18. And that is a definition of a child. Anybody above 18, you can choose to go open. The other protection that is offered under the law is on matrimonial matters, matters of domestic law, between a wife and a husband. The court can choose to go in camera. But for an adult can choose or can reject. In this case, we imagine that they did not object, they chose to do it. But a must protection is only for those below 18. And the other protection is provided in matrimonial matters. That is it. So it's absolutely right for these girls, if they so wish, to have come open. So I want to summarize by saying the method of carrying the girls is not new to some of us who have grown up with Museveni. Even in the military, he would pick the concerned persons to come and speak for themselves. Even in chief administrative officers, he would. So rather than make a rhetoric speech like Buchanan was the other man I told you, broke Karl Marx followers into two. That he was such a good orator that had he asked his audience to cut off their throats, they would have done. But that is not Museveni. The thing I wanted to make, any inconsistencies, whether they look good or this and that, these are people who have stayed for long. First of all, the inconsistencies may have appeared in the mind of the listener. But also, yes, because let me tell you, inconsistency is easy to appear. Did you know that if we put a radio here and we heard that President Museveni is going tomorrow to Iganga, and you ask all of us to go and report somewhere, do you know that others would say he's going to Kamuli, another would say he's going to G.
Not me.
Really, we did a research on this. Communication hearing is different. We did a communication research in Lira. We just wrote a piece of paper and said cholera has broken in Utuke. Government should rush with medicine. Wait, and you remove this piece of paper, tell the next person to whisper to the next day, then you ask the last person to answer. You know what he said? The last person told us, from the regional, cholera has broken in Utuke, government should rush with the medicine. The last reporting to the plenary was, Museveni, things are bad, it needs a helicopter. So all these people who listen have a sense of distorting their own things. So,
but you see, Major,
but if there is any inconsistency, could have been in the story narration or otherwise, which you cannot delve in to make a big deal because there was inconsistencies. Finally, my colleague talks about manipulation, that Museveni manipulates. Manipulation, I would like to assure that in our revolutionary methods of work, there's nothing like manipulation. For us, even used to say in Swahili, namna kuangalia sida na kutatua, how to identify problems and solve. Okay? And all political commissars are taught this basic. If we were manipulating, or Museveni was manipulating, and stay in power for 40 years, then it is a good business. I call upon manipulators to join. You can only stay the duty, the duration when you are talking of what actually affects the people. It is only the truth which is the ideological weapon. If it is manipulation, I call on our colleagues to also manipulate and stay for 40 years. You can't. You can only stay on that long as you are telling the truth. The truth is your ideology. There's no manipulation. Back to your question of Sudan and the mentioning of leaders. You see, these are issues, first of all, Museveni had raised with them. Okay? There has been quiet diplomacy with them. Even where it has failed, we have gone on aid collusion, like in the case of Sudan, by purposely supporting Southern Sudan, because the diplomacy would have failed and said, you know what, since I've talked to my colleague, I've met my colleagues on the sidelines of OAU, on the sideline of UN, I've visited, things have not worked, so let us support the liberation of South Sudan, and we break off. And that happened. So what Museveni is talking, when you're talking about the past leaders, he has diplomatically done all avenues. And that is why in the case of Southern Sudan, we had to put boots on the ground to completely cut off and think that was the best way to do it. So it has nothing to do with talking about past leaders. He had done it in soft diplomacy, even using intermediaries. It failed and we took actions. So talking about past leaders in this respect is not a big deal, because he knows if he was to unpackage and open the veil, he will tell you we did all this. I'm doing this because we have so many steps that we took and that could not work.
Thank you, Major. And as I come to Dr. Sarah, since you talk diplomacy, recently the government of Uganda has taken the government of Kenya into the East African Court of Justice over the failure of the government of Kenya to grant license to Uganda National Oil Company to allow it transact oil business for the country of Uganda. What does this mean for the relations between Uganda and Kenya?
Well, I think just 2 comments on personal security and national before I go to our regional security. Personal security includes elements like famine. Are people able to afford food? We have increased robberies in our communities. Cars are being vandalized every night. People's homes are being broken into. It's as if police does not exist, or maybe is overwhelmed. You look at the increasing poverty in communities, which comes with increasing, common theft or thuggery.
True.
and it's on a very terrible rise in our communities. You look at the state, for example, the state of, increasing homicides. I think Masindi, the district medical officer, was murdered. You look at other murders, we still have popular state murders like the businessman Katanga, where now the family, all the children almost are in jail. So you look at that security and safety at that macro level, and you find that the slogan of Tweva Katuro, I think now has long been forgotten, because I don't know who sleeps.
Yourself, you sleep.
How?
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 You must buy 2 big dogs. You put wires around your fence. You buy cameras. You get a scary, but still, when the window bangs, you cannot sleep.
Yes.
So you have this state in the country, and of course the likes of attempted attacks on Pastor Jingo, whether it was a murder, whether it was not a murder, that attempt has been very controversial. Personally, as an advocate, I could not reconstruct the scene of crime narrations. It could not make sense. The scene of crime matters could not add up. Of course, a lot of bloggers have made it fun, but I think society deserves to know what actually happened, because that is a build-up of so many other criminal,
But you see, Doctor,
happenings
when
in the
you ask
country.
what happened, we have a soldier that died. We have a pastor that is injured. That is what happened.
Yes, and we're asking the circumstances.
You see, scene of crime includes things. When you hear police saying we are going to reconstruct the scene, you were hit at this point. Which direction did the bullets come from? The other, the Afande will add in other elements. I don't know how to handle a gun. But you need to look at which direction did the bullets come from? What was the aim? Did they hit their target or they missed their target? Did the foreign bodyguard, did he take somebody's bullet? Oh, he was the target. Do you know that, for example? You don't. So when you look at other elements, the injured person, then you have a car moving that tampers with the scene of crime. A car did not appear for 2 days. When it appeared, it also raised other questions. Those are the scene of crime issues that I'm talking about. I think up to now, we do not have a real construct of the scene of crime events in that matter. And for me, it can only mean 2 things. Either the whistleblowers or the complainants or the detectives, one of them is not doing their work. Because I think that story is not complete up to today. When you compare with the previous events, like the late Kagezi, Joanne, attempt at Katumba, and when the daughter took the bullet meant for him. For example, now are you sure that the bodyguard took the bullet meant for Pastor Ojambo? Are you sure about that?
Police says they have CCTV footage, maybe.
Whose bullet was it? Who was the target? Do you know that? I think nobody knows. So these are scene of crime events that are not complete. I don't want to engage in other issues that bloggers are engaging in. I'm trying to follow if I was on either legal side of that case. You don't have a case, or you don't have even what to defend, assuming you were on the defense side. It doesn't add up. So for me, that is the story that I find that complicates our security. Then the other element is on, for example, there were Pastor Sempa, and I think it was only Pastor Sempa saying, now there is need, pastors are a target, there is a need for protection. And then the questions that came out of that Then what about the protection of God? What about, or how should our religious leaders, what kind of protection should be accorded to them? Especially given that the state has a duty to protect all persons in the country with their property. So if we go singling out the people we consider important and we concentrate on protecting them, then who will protect the muntu wa wansi, whose vehicles are being vandalized, whose houses are being broken into, who are being cut with pangas? Who will protect them? Or when will the state focus on them? So should every citizen now have a bodyguard? Is that the security that NRM is providing? Or they should provide security as a common good that benefits everybody? Those are the questions that maybe a funder which could help throw light on them, because they've been concentrating on the people they consider VIPs. So then who should protect the ones they don't consider VIPs? When it comes to our bilateral relations with our neighbors, DRC has just come out of elections, and the process of elections, I think, damaged further their relations with Rwanda, to the extent that the two countries went to war. Anytime now, it wouldn't be surprising. You have our situation with Kenya, where it's common belief that Uganda interferes in Kenya's electoral processes from the time of Awich 2007, that led to the bloodbath or the post-election violence that claimed many lives.
Dr. Interference in the electoral process.
I'm now speaking from the common perceptions in Kenya. During 2007, it was common news item that Uganda had interfered with Kenya's electoral process. There were threats to remove the rails so that the goods that come from Kenya to Uganda do not cross, because we had interfered with democracy in a neighboring country.
They blocked trailers. We suffered here.
We suffered here without fuel for 1 month because the protesting people blocked any goods coming into Uganda on that allegation. There were reports that UPDF had been traced in Kenya in 2007. Unfortunately, that election became so violent and claimed lives. But also, it ushered Kenya into another new phase of improved democracy compared to before, through the new constitutional dispensation and larger freedoms for people participation in democracy. Every other election since then, that allegation has never gone away of Uganda's interference in Kenya's electoral process. I observed the last elections in Kenya. From the state of Serena, Nairobi, to a few popular hotels surrounding it, you could meet more than 3 Ugandans. Out of 10 people you met, 3 would be Ugandans at the time of elections. Not all of them had gone to observe elections. Of course, we do a lot of trading with Kenya, but at the time of voting, it is assumed that there is minimal trading, really. People normally wait for the aftermath of elections. So there was also talk that Uganda had interfered with the servers in the last elections in Kenya. There are close ties between Museveni and the President Ruto, with close business ties. We have Ruto's petrol stations everywhere, the Starbucks. He has an economic interest in that chain of petrol stations. They are now in every town.
And almost every street.
Yeah. There is talk of iron ore interests in Kigezi region. So we have a lot of economic dealings between President Ruto with President Museveni, but also in Uganda. So when the move to establish the fuel monopoly started, people thought that maybe with these close ties, because the government said, first of all, the law was rushed. 3 days. Unheard of. The law was rushed, and the government said they had done background work. So given the background of dealings with Ruto, with our administration here, one would have thought that maybe that talk of background work was harmonization of licensing between Uganda and Kenya. The law is passed, government assures parliament that they will have the fuel, but good enough, common sense element prevailed, and a few MPs pushed for an exception clause for other fuel dealers to bring in. Government fought at first that exceptional clause, but it prevailed. If it wasn't for that exception, we would now be in a fuel crisis in this country today, because apparently the government did not do any background work for the fuel monopoly. So, and this exception, so we are now running on the exception. This exception is likely to become the norm for another 2 or 3 years. Because as we talk now, Uganda has sued Kenya in the East African Court of Justice. But what is the basis of that suit? Kenya, as a sovereign state, has conditions for one to be licensed as a fuel dealer. You must trade in fuel for a business of $10 million for 3 years. You must have a chain supply of a minimum of 5 stations that you own, among other requirements. We have a law that we passed at the end of the year. UNOC has no known chain supply for fuel. UNOC has no balance sheet or audited books of accounts to show that they've been dealing in fuel and they have a stock of $10 million for 3 years. Now you rush to court that you've been denied the license. I think really our legal team needs to calm down in some circumstances. I don't think we meet any single qualification for the license. This can only be solved through diplomacy and political negotiations. So what has taken us to court? I don't understand.
Thank you, Dr. Sarah. Dr. Robert, you see what Dr. Sarah paints is an impossible legal situation. We don't have a background on which we can stand to take Kenya to court. How can this be harmonized politically?
For me, I think that matter is going to be sorted. Because some of these dealers that she's mentioning may have already even gotten what they're supposed to get, and that is all. We have been seeing what happens in this country, whereby certain things, there is a formalization for nothing. Because me, I normally think that government has now resorted to, and you see, when we decided to go to take up these IMF conditionalities of allowing the private sector to do much of the movement of goods and services from people to the state, and the state only facilitates through making laws and putting in place a conducive thing. I thought that we were there deliberately, and you had to develop. I remember in 1994 there was a lot of debate in parliament to accept this method to take off, especially when they were selling off Uganda Commercial Bank. That is the best debate I've ever seen in my parliament. And I thought that the government has learnt a lot of lessons out of this with its PPDA processes and so on. And I thought that the role of government now would be to put in mechanisms to allow the private sector to give us goods and services. That's what they have been preaching to us. But in the last 10 or so years, there has come a group of dealermanship, whereby you have now, they are not companies, they are not, if they are companies, they are not very clear, and there is a lot of deals being done. In fact, somebody has been saying, and I tend to buy their view, that State House has become a deal-cutting center. So much so that by the time the thing comes to Parliament, as he was trying to argue, State House has put a lot of force for that law to pass, or it either passes or it passes. You know, for those who are in Makerere, we used to have a hall there called the North Court. They always said that they either win or they lose.
Or you lose.
That they will win or the opponents lose. So it was either. And for me, that is bad. And therefore, in most cases, things are done without proper study, because the dealmen want something to happen very fast. You remember the oil saga in a few years ago, which involved Mama Mbabazi and other people, when they were passing that oil law. It created a lot of problems to an extent that it was very, very difficult. It was very difficult even people to understand what was in the law itself, what was in the law, and what was in the contract. And I remember somebody even trying to get some litigation over that, and they were defeated because people wanted to see what is in the details of this contract, of the oil contracts. And it has continued on so many things. Why the roads are shoddy right now? We have shoddy roads. I've been hearing on platforms that the roads are only bad in Kampala. The rest of the places, the roads are okay. For me, who comes from eastern Uganda, I am worried of going home, because by the time you reach Jinja, it's like you have traveled the 100 miles, and yet the place is less than 60 miles. It's because you get somebody getting a contract to do a road, he has no capacity or she has no capacity, gets another one. So by the time you reach the one who is going to implement the work, there are 4 dealer men there. And therefore, right now, unfortunately for Kenya, and I think Kenyans will pardon me, they have also gotten a president who is a deal man, because the president says he's a chicken seller. In fact, that was his slogan.
Hustler.
And I used to think it was a joke. He has one of the biggest companies to sell chicken and chicken products in East Africa. I'm hearing right now that he's attached to these Starbucks. I was wondering whether mushrooms had turned into petrol stations. These days, you wake up in the morning and you find a petrol station named Starbucks, and you wonder, why has this one been put here? Because even you find that is put where it is not needed. So we are bound to get problems. You have a dealer man in Kenya, and you have deal men in Uganda. So there is a lot of trouble, because this oil thing here, I don't think the target is to reduce the price of the pump oil price in Chireka or in Naria or wherever, or to make sure that the supply of petrol and diesel or generally kerosene is in constant supply. Me, I think deal men want to get money, and you are bound to get problems. So when you ask me that can't we use any other means, there is no way you can use any other means when you are dealing with the dealer men. For example, yesterday I was analyzing the budget of Uganda. It is shocking that now, the whole of the last 3 years, one of our highest lenders are private money lenders.
Yes.
We are not even now getting money from known organizations like IMF, World Bank, European Union, and what have you, because those ones have put very serious restrictions because of our misbehavior here. So now we are borrowing money from individuals, and those individuals, you wonder where they get money. from government to lend government. So much so that now we have clocked 100 trillion. 100 trillion. So our debts are ×2 of our budget. Who is increasing it? Dealmen. So sorting out things with the dealmen, you will need a very serious whip. You will need a very serious whip to remove this dealmen from our business, especially in provision of social services, and we use known companies and organizations. Because if Sarah says that this company does not have those qualifications,
Yes.
why did we front it to be the one to take a monopoly? It
Thank you,
means that
Doctor.
there is a dealer man. So for us now, we need to reorganize, and the reorganization needs to start from the top. If you don't reorganize the top, so President Museveni must whip. If he has the ability, he must come up
Must
with
whip
the whip.
or he should be whipped?
No, I am not reaching there yet.
All right.
Must come up with the whip to make sure that these people get off. Otherwise, even in Kenya, it is the same problem. If you have been following the Kenyan politics right now, there is a lot of struggle. In fact, they now call the president of Kenya. This is how the Kenyans are calling him. They are calling him Zakayo, the biblical man who is just coming to collect money. So I don't know how the two are going to work.
Thank you so much, Doctor. Thank you so much for that analysis, and thank you, colleagues. We are heading into a very short break, and we shall be right back.
National Water and Sewage Corporation is committed to providing cost-effective, clean, safe, and reliable quality water and sewage solutions in urban centers across Uganda. National Water and Sewage Corporation reaffirms its commitment to 100% service coverage, geographical expansion, infrastructure development, water quality, pro-poor initiatives, customer care and stakeholder engagement, catchment, and water source protection. Be a water hero. Pay your bills to zero balance. Report all leaks, busts, and illegal water connections to enable us serve you better. Reach us through our toll-free numbers on 0800 200 977 or 0800 300 977. You can also communicate with us through any of our online platforms or visit the National Water and Sewage Corporation office nearest to you. This message is brought to you by National Water and Sewage Corporation.
You are still on Uganda's leading freedom platform, the CivicSpaceTV, and this is the Citizens Chat Show. I am Phillip Muliisa. Today, I'm joined by retired Major Awich Pollar from the NRM, Honorable Joseph Ochieno from Uganda People's Congress, Dr. Sarah Bireete from the Center for Constitutional Governance.
Add that the one which is not in NRM, Uganda People's Congress, which is not in NRM.
Thank you. He will give us that clarity. And Dr. Robert Ojambo from Kyambogo University. And in this second segment of the show, we want to look at the non-aligned movement conference that is happening in this country next week. And many Ugandans are asking, NAM conference, what is this thing? Dr. Robert, for a Ugandan that is out there and has not gone to school, has not studied a lot to understand all these dynamics of politics in the world, what is the non-aligned movement?
Thank you, Philip. The non-aligned movement came about after the Korean civil war in 1950s. It was an aftermath of that, whereby the Korean civil war was as a result of the Cold War then. The Cold War was that conflict between the capitalist West and the socialist or communist East, where North Korea was being supported by the communist East and South Korea by the capitalist West. So there was a country called Yugoslavia with its leader called Beto. And this man did not want to support any of this. So he convinced the then Prime Minister of India, Nehru, and they came up with something of being neutral. Let me use that example. That they wanted to be neutral in those matters, and their purpose was to safeguard the the sovereignty and the independence of their countries. Remember, India had just gotten independence in 1947, and 48 there was a struggle between India and Pakistan, which they managed to resolve by separating the two countries, Pakistan being for the Hindu Muslims and India for the Indians. They were immediately joined by some leaders also, for example, the leader of Indonesia, then of course the Kwame Nkrumah of Africa, Abdel Nasser of Egypt. So there were 5 countries at the beginning, to sum it up, who decided that they were not going to support either capitalist West or but it was also a way of trying to balance the powers that had started in the United Nations organization. Because the United Nations organization, according to them, was mainly a Western thing which was being run by the US to promote capitalist interests. And therefore, they wanted a voice. So from there, many countries started getting independence, including Uganda, and many other countries joined. Especially these are mainly countries from the south, what we normally call the south, or what we used to call in schools third world countries. So majority of the countries you find in non-alignment movement, countries from the third world, that is South America, Africa, and Asia. So in total right now we have 120 member countries, where Uganda is one of them. And therefore, for them, they want to always be neutral. That is their principle.
Thank you so much, Dr. Robert, for helping us understand what the NAM is, where it started, and what it does. Dr. Sarah, the key concept mentioned by Dr. Robert here is being neutral. How does this neutrality help Ugandans and the other people that are in this kind of arrangement?
Yeah, I think during the Cold War era, the talk was neither facing east nor west.
Yeah.
So there was polarization between the forces of the USA and its allies, and those of the Soviet Union and allies. And the non-aligned movement thought that they would stop being the pawns in the game by providing majority for either side. Yet they had their own issues to deal with. As the doctor has specified them, issues to deal with the neocolonialism and imperialism, issues to deal with the human rights at that moment, issues to deal with total independence of states, including apartheid in South Africa, the white settlers in Zimbabwe, and the question of Palestine that is still now high on table.
True.
So when you look at those big agendas, one would now ask, what is the focus of non-aligned movement today? Or what has the non-aligned movement achieved since 1964? Is it 1964 when they were established?
1961.
Yes, when they were established. What have they achieved? Tangible achievements. Yes, they ended apartheid in South Africa. They liberated, providing for full liberation of countries in the South. Is it North America?
South America.
South America.
South America.
South America, yes, South America. You can look at the position of the Arab League, the Organization of Islamic Conference. Those are some of the lobby groups under the non-aligned movement. But as we talk today, what are the contentious issues? First of all, I think the non-aligned movement, majority of the countries have not built capacity at the national level. Because in international law, there is a principle of superior states. If you say you are, for example, declaring autonomy, then the question is, who is recognizing you as an independent state? And once you have the big nations, like the US, you have UK, you have Germany saying they are recognizing you, then it is easier to attain independence faster and even be recognized as an independent state in the UN system, as an independent member state. But when you are recognized by smaller entities, Uganda, Kenya, DRC, Somalia, South Sudan, then people say, who are these ones? And then it will take you longer to attain that. And the same is happening between the controversy between Somalia and Somaliland, which is now an issue with Somaliland, contracting with the Ethiopia. And people are saying it's double standards. Yet Somaliland has been struggling for a breakaway for some time, but the question is who recognizes them? Who is behind them? So these states have not built enough capacity to command respect at the international level. And mainly because of bad governance. You can take a lump sum of Africa. In Africa, I think you can you can point at South Africa, Nigeria, Egypt,
yes,
and Ghana, Morocco, as countries that really speak and everybody listens. The rest are dismissed because of misgovernance in their nation states.
Doctor, these are 120 nations.
Yes, no, I'm coming. I just took an example of the bulk of because almost all African countries are members of the non-aligned movement. So I just took that as an example to show you how bad governance has undermined the capacity of the non-aligned movement to make a substantial stand on critical issues at the global stage.
In fact, their leader, Yugoslavia, crumbled.
Yes,
now
nowhere. So when you look at that, they are neither here nor there as states. Majority of them are like us here, struggling. So that's the problem. When you look at the issues now, let's look at the African position on Ukraine. Because what are the contentious issues today that NAM will address? Number one is still the question of Palestine independence and the two-state solution. The second issue is still Ukraine war. The third issue still remains veto powers for an African member to become a permanent member of the UN Security Council and have veto powers. But what do we have capacity? Unless we all went as a combination of 55 and say we have veto powers Africa. But one single state, maybe South Africa can try. Because if you look at countries, the permanent members of the US Security Council, they have capacity to threaten each other. They have capacity to threaten with the nuclear power. They have capacity to threaten with the economic sanctions. So what capacity do we have to threaten the rest of the actors?
We shall not export pineapples
from the garden with no value addition. So this is the problem of the bulk of the membership. So the question then the issues that I would be looking forward to in this NAM is, can we come up with a clear position on our demands for the UN Security Council? Can we come up with a clear decision on the two-state solution for Palestine and Israel? Today was the first hearing of the South African case against genocide, the Israel genocide in Gaza. How many African states? Uganda is going to assume a chairmanship. Can they make a substantial stand on the question of Gaza? Or they are weighing options between West and East? Yet NAM principle is we neither face West nor East. But can Museveni, as the incoming chairman, take a stand against the West? No. And that's the conclusion of irrelevance of NAM. That summarizes how irrelevant NAM can be.
Thank you, Dr. Sarah. Honorable Joseph, 120 nations, they cannot be relevant.
They cannot be?
Irrelevant.
They're not irrelevant. But the meeting in Kampala is a huge amount of waste of public resources. It's a PR exercise for Mr. Museveni, and to be fair, it's a plus for him to have managed to host it. But generally for the citizens of this country, except for the people who will go and get some monies in hotels and some of these other things, neither here nor there. In any case, anyway, many of the convoys in the streets of Kampala are actually just a disgrace and an inconvenience to our people, I must say. And then on the other, the fundamental on question of non-aligned movement, actually, partly as suggested by my colleagues, but actually, just to emphasize focus, is actually that this was something that should today be generating ideological conversations at his university and most of the top institutions of learning in this country. I, as president of Uganda People's Congress, I should have been invited. Comrade Awich, tell the protocol guys in NRA to begin to learn to be sensibly nationalist. I should be receiving, honestly, I should receive an invitation to go and participate. But you know why? One, because...
because you're not the president of the UPC.
No, I am the de facto president of UPC. But let me just make the point, away from UPC, but to help your viewers, including younger viewers like yourselves. At 1961, the formation of the non-aligned movement was actually really about these really brave leaders at the time to recognize that they did not want to become ideological prisoners. While in Uganda's case today, we have an ideological prostitute, almost, in quotes, in a guy who's neither here nor there. Tito at the time had just broken away from Soviet Russia, and with a good record, having fought the Nazis, and broken away from Russia and formed Yugoslavia. They felt, as my colleagues talk about, in question of East or West. So this was an ideological thing. And then the Nehru of India, very progressive left, of course, those are UPC associates in ideological terms. These guys were saying that with our new nation states as founded, we will not be held hostage by the position of Anglo-America when we want to develop our nuclear dams, nuclear weapons. No, are we going to be held by the East when we want to take a position on something that, in our opinion, necessarily matters? So it was not necessarily about neutrality per se to simply say that we're here locked up. We're simply saying that when there's a strategic the conversation that we need to have with Americans, we shall have with them on terms. And when there is something to be happening with our friends in Russia, we will. The NAM finding itself at the core of liberation struggles that my colleagues say is right, but simply because most of the then guys were holding liberation, particularly in Africa and Southern America, hostage were the West. And for that reason, these guys simply say that no, these are partners in global polity. And of course, the Western countries were holding this, like in South Africa, it was purely ideological, right-wing body polity. What has happened since then to date? Fast forward. I don't know whether the issue is necessarily that we are neutral. The issue is that Uganda hosting this conference, and that's why I deliberately brought the UPC thing, and I'm basically provoking a debate from around your circles, that young Ugandans should be saying that, look, non-aligned movement, non-aligned to the east, to the west. The ideological west is basically these guys for whom Museveni has been the Nyampala. They believe in that you're saying in profit, that profit is everything. That right. So Museveni sells the entirety of Ugandan public service, health, education, infrastructure, including Nagongera roads, to Anglo-American, World Bank-linked private interests, to come, the Pinetis of this world, to come and literally run Uganda. That is actually the point, on the one hand. On the other, most of these other leaders were simply saying that, look, we believe that the state, big government, which is basically a left-leaning thinking, big government is one in which if you have Uganda, government has a role not only to provide, but in many cases to regulate, including regulating businesses. And so therefore my annoyance that even if the unlikely event that you sold off our electricity, which UPC would renationalize anyway, you sold off our electricity, it's your responsibility as a state to make sure that you regulate in terms of make sure that the services are provided, you make your little profit, and you don't inconvenience our citizens. You see. Number two, the telecommunications that I was having problems with some young people in Tororo this morning, that you're in Tororo and you're in Kampala, but you can't talk on phone because of networks. The responsibility of the state is to say, we're talking now, the responsibility of the state is to make sure that this dubious former apartheid company, MTN, if it is, and is now here, granted private But if you come here, you make sure that there is access in Bushenyi, there is access in Karamoja, and you do not take those transmitters, what are they? The boosters. You don't take the boosters to Nagongera because you've got market there. You take the boosters to Nagongera because they're citizens in Nagongera. So as part of the deal of the state, you make profit in a particular corner in Chinoni, where profit is there, and Kampala, and Kyambogo, where the customers. But it is a service to a place like maybe Bireete, where there are not enough citizens to make profit, but add part of the global thing because the government has a response. Those are some of the detailed negotiations that we're able to have as a state to regulate. That is what governments that don't believe on one-way profit, but on provision the other. So those were the, and you'll see therefore that the Kaunda, the Nkrumahs came in, and most of the government states that were there were basically mainly progressive left. Challenge, as Sarah says though, I think it's important background, is what has happened. I think while actually we were very critical about the Musevenis and others on the continent, I think neoliberal agenda seems to have pushed to the extent that when you find countries like India now is being run by a very right-wing government. And so this issue about ideology has gone off. But I'm not saying that government should be run on the madness of ideology, but ideology should be able to guide us and make sure that while profit motive for a few individuals on the one hand, and role of the bigger government, meaning the state, on the other. And in there lies where we are today. I think it's as confused as it was 20 years ago. Certainly it was clearer, ironically, in the 60s than it is today.
Thank you, Honorable Joseph, from the Uganda People's Congress. Major Awich, under the chairmanship of President Yoweri Museveni, what is Uganda looking to achieve from the NAM?
Okay. Thank you so much. First of all, I want to add my voice on the historical perspective of Nana Line. Doctor said much, but of course the leader in the Yugoslav, the person who was in the steering is Tito, not Beto, I think, Tito. But also I like to realign the thinking of capitalism versus the East, so communism. The crux of the idea was that you could be either, but still be Nana Line. Is that right?
No, you would support that.
Yes. When you put capitalism, socialism, you're talking of the economic structure of a system. Capitalism simply means economic system where private ownership of property thrives. Socialism professes a socialist ownership of means of production where the state has a lot of control. But the gist of Nana Line was that you should not be in military blocks. The Western military blocks was NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization. The Eastern bloc was Warsaw Pact, which was formed and ratified in Poland, Warsaw. Now, these two military blocks are divided the world. In other words, in Nana Line, Zambia could be organizing its economy on a capitalist basis, but Zambia would still be in Nana Line. At the same time, actually, Yugoslavia was socialist, you remember?
Yeah, I don't see.
Yugoslavia was socialist under Tito, but still being socialist. And Cuba was socialist and communist, but there were great leaders in Nana Line. So I like to realign our viewers to say...
Wasn't Yugoslavia part of Warsaw Pact?
No, it wasn't. It was Nana Line. They were the leaders. So Cuba, Soviet Union, Yugoslavia, they were great socialists, but Nana Line. Other countries, including Egypt, were great capitalists, or even Zambia, Uganda, whatever, but they were Nana Line. So the Nana Line was not so much on the economic structure of your country, whether you want private ownership of means of production or a state ownership of means of production. Nana Line was more on people not belonging to the two military pacts. And that is why it was a condition that for you to be a member, you must not have signed a military protection under any of those army organizations. Now, I like to make that clear. Now, so, but as I already said, Zambia can be having a capitalist economy that is practicing private ownership of means of production. Cuba can be communist with state ownership means of production, but all of them will be non-aligned. As long as you are not allied to the military pacts. NATO versus Warsaw Pact. Now, the other thing is that, to your question, what would be achieved under the chairmanship, I would even break it into two, and what is Uganda achieving now? As the achievement is both as a country, but also as a movement. Meaning the movement is for the best interest of the 120 members. But as a country, I would like to say we have achieved by even mere hosting, because the hosting, and I'm yet to hear from the Congress, we are hosting because of the good achievements under NRM. Without NRM achievement, we wouldn't have hosted. Why? This activity is hosted every 3 years. Since 1961, we are left with 297 countries. In other words, to be hosted every 3 years, it would take 360 countries to round up all the countries. That is basically 400 years. From today, to cover all the countries hosting, because somebody will argue that is rotational, to cover all the countries, we are still left with 297 years to complete. So, for you to host, there is a checklist you must meet. Democracy, peace in your country, all this and all that. So for a country to apply like Uganda, there's a committee which verifies and checks. Otherwise, it was by automatic nature, without the achievement of NRM. We would still host this thing after 297 years. That is after 300 years. We would be something else. So the hosting is not by chance. The hosting of NAM is not by chance. If we were to wait, we are yet to wait for 297 years. So that is the peace ushered in. The other thing that you see is that personally the country has benefited infrastructurally. There's a common norm even at household level. There's a common saying in Langis that Welokelo yang means a visitor brings satisfaction. You may have your chicken or your goat, but you may not slaughter it until you see a visitor. If doctor comes to my house, at least my cock had spared, I would slaughter because doctor is there, or because Congress is there, because SAR is there. So there's something which by nature you do when you are doing for visitors. Even Switzerland, developed as it is, if it was to host a major event today, I'm sure they will add, what is this thing at the airport? Where you enter from, gates.
The terminal.
The terminals. If Switzerland at the airport had 100 terminals, it may have to add 50 terminals, and that is development. So anything that you host, because of visitors, you do a little more. It happens in all countries. When America hosted World Cup in 1994, they built stadiums. They did so much. Leave alone Qatar recently when they hosted. Qatar is a whole rich country. So this event put things
What
that
have we
ideally
built
would, even
now?
the beauty of the road. You have seen from Entebbe.
Those
From
projects
Entebbe, we have
were,
worked on the roads at a rate we wouldn't have. And this is what happens even at household level.
What else? What else?
So, I will list for you. How about tourism? The definition of a tourist, is somebody who moves to another location and stays overnight. That's the definition of a tourist. That's why we can have internal and foreign tourists. Some people think when you're in Uganda, you go to Masinde to see, you are not a tourist. It falls within the definition of a tourist. But hosting this thing has exposed that in tourism. Having 120 countries, both in terms of the income a tourist generates to a country, but also in terms of visibility and marketing. Do you know how much it costs to advertise Uganda on CNN just for 1 minute? 1 minute of adverts. It's a lot of money. But how about having 120 countries focusing on Uganda for even 1 week alone? But also in the individual host countries, they're saying our president has gone to Uganda. That's much more money that you would have done in terms of advertising for you in CNN or BBC. So all these are covered. Now, at a global level, You have in UN 193 member states. And this one you have 140 actually.
120.
120. So you have 120 which are members. It's just second to 193, which is a totality of UN member states. Okay? So now,
but your decisions
No,
can
G77 is higher because G77 is 134 plus China.
yes, but your decisions.
But you are, what you are giving is
no,
right.
it is. What are you saying?
For me, the UN membership as he gets the number is that you are 120, but your decision can be vetoed by one entity.
Okay. I am saying that you can find for me, make it to be exact.
No, it is 120.
It's fine. It's
membership of NAM.
It's 120. Yes, 120 members.
120 members?
Yes.
I wonder why I'm thinking it is 140.
No,
That's
it is
for
the G77 is 134 plus their supporter China.
How many countries? Okay.
Yes, Majors, we get the numbers. You can be
yes,
telling us
you get
about
it
what
for me. I
President
just want to
Museveni-
be sure.
He
It
doubts
is
us.
120.
He doubts us terribly.
120. I have
Is that why I was thinking 140? Okay, 120. Now, I'm saying at a multilateral level for Uganda to achieve, to be entrusted with the leadership of this, it means at all level, Uganda chairs. For example, if you're going to have this NAM meeting in New York, it is chaired by Uganda. If a NAM members decide to sit, say, in a AU in Addis, it is chaired by Uganda. If the Foreign Affairs Ministry meeting of NAM, it is chaired by JJ Odongo.
for the
If it
next
is a meeting,
2 years.
if it is, yeah, if it is chaired by if it is a meeting of heads of states, it is chaired by Museveni. And you know the role of a chair. A chair, you have the advantage to generate consensus. Well, ideally, you're supposed to hear from members, but as a chair, you generate and panel beat, you direct the course of events. So it gives Uganda a much say at international arena. We get that. But also as a unit, the vision that a chair holds embeds into the matters or the decision of the organization. So we shall have a big, you will see a lot of shuttle diplomacy now to Uganda to convince Museveni so that NAM takes a position. Remember when we vote in New York, you vote as a NAM group. I am a beneficiary of such a group because of Uganda's participation. When I was being elected in New York, from the 193 countries, I knew fairly I had a big vote already from NAM. Because Uganda put its position, fellow members, we have a candidate from Uganda in the names of Awich Pollar, please vote. I am a beneficiary of such voting. So it impedes even in voting processes, in treaty bodies, like voting for judges, going to ICC, voting for, there are many votes that take place in UN, voting for judges, voting for this, Security Council. Now let me comment about the aspect of veto power. Veto power in Security Council exists. The veto power is a power given to the 5 permanent members, US, UK, France, China, and Russia. The veto is to the effect that there must be unanimity. Unanimity means if a motion is brought forward, if one of them say no, it kills the motion. So unanimity means all of them must not say no. One must not say no. But these are matters of security. And NAM does not really persuade itself to the drafting nature of Security Council resolutions. Security Council resolutions are very specific on security. But all the same, if NAM wants to pronounce a position of Gaza, being with the number, it can persuade the members of the veto power not to veto. But that is persuasive because veto holders hold veto. But to a big extent, even veto holders are very nervous about knowing a NAM because you're knowing such a big group and no country would want to antagonize such a big group.
Major, are they nervous?
Yes, they are. Because they need it. You see, they need it. There are votes which are taken in security. For Security Council issues, you need NAM. For example, I can assure you, one time in Security Council, no, not Security Council, in General Assembly, USA wanted a position, and it was supposed to be voted by General Assembly. It was not a Security Council matter. Libya wanted. Libya defeated US in that voting, and it was so embarrassing. And moreover, for the US, every country had hypocritically sent what is called a verbal, not verbal. A not verbal is a letter you send to a friendly country, said, we are supporting you. You count on us. So US had received nearly 190, because there are states which would not send. I can't count for you. Cuba would not send, North Korea would not send, and Libya itself would not send. I can assure you even Soviet Union, Russia could have sent. So they had a huge collection of not verbal.
So Uganda
Coming to vote, Uganda must have sent. Coming to vote, Libya defeated under Gaddafi, US. So you cannot tell me there's a country which can just set aside such a big group of states, because not all matters are decided in Security Council. Security Council handles security matters, but you want a judge to ICC, the ordinary voting. You want a judge to human rights, the way we went, ordinary voting. So who would ignore such a big block?
Thank you, Major. Thank you. Dr. Robert, Major talks about the persuasive nature of this block, and I want to look at the negative politics that is around this country. The chairmanship of Uganda, does it help us improve on this image, bring it back to positive, especially with the West and how we can relate with them?
I think that does not matter in non-alignment movement. It doesn't matter which image you have. Just look at Azerbaijan, which is going to hand over the mantle to us. Azerbaijan is not a very democratic country, and you know there are problems with their neighbors, Almeria and others. In fact, it has been a huge question whether they even have a say. But having said that, Uganda, I think I agree to some extent with the Major.
Thank you.
That NAM being hosted in Uganda is not useless. It can never be useless if you understand geopolitical issues of the world. For the first thing is that at least now we are also growing to a place where we can be allowed to host such things. And for me, it is very good. We have had negative publicity for the whole of last year. Some powers declaring Uganda a dangerous country, which you should not go. But now the 33 speakers and their deputies were here. None of them died from here. So that one is a good thing for me as a Ugandan. And now 120 are coming, then 134 will come the other week. I think this gives us confidence as Ugandans, because Ugandans sometimes we are laughing stock when we go outside there. Somebody asks you, are from Uganda? You say, now how have you survived Konyi? The people even still think that Konyi is still here. And the other dangerous people. So that is number one. But number two, you see, everybody is struggling for a space in this world politics. And like Major Awich has said, I think now there are going to be lobby groups into this place to try and lobby the chairman and the other members to convince on certain things. And of course, the little economics that people keep on saying on radio, where people are going to get some little money to sell here and the tourism and so on. But by and large, NAM is really a contradiction. For us who teach it to students, it's a huge contradiction. When you look at the objectives of NAM, sovereignty, independence, human rights, and so on and so forth, you find that, as Sarah said earlier, few members of NAM have really put their effort on achieving those things that they were talking about. Look at sovereignty. There is no way you can have sovereignty with a poor economy. Most of these countries are terribly poor. I was just giving you an example of Uganda. Uganda now has a debt which is ×2 of their annual budget. For example, I was just calculating yesterday, each Ugandan now need to pay 2.79 million shillings to pay that debt. And if we are to pay that debt, we are going to pay debts, I don't know up to which year. So such a country really is still struggling. When you look at the next budget which is coming, if you have been looking at it carefully, we don't have even money to use, because 29 trillion is going to pay debt. Then the other one is the current budget. So money to invest.
We have paper money. We just have paper money.
We
Not
don't have
real
money to invest.
It's just on paper.
In fact, the only investment is going to be on security, to buy security things. But that is not really investment. It does not produce profits. So, in real terms, look at the members of NAM. India, which one? Uganda, and so on and so forth. Who can say that US has refused or has vetoed this business? I will come in and give you whatever they have not given you. I think none of them. They are just like a gang of poor people crying together. So that is one big problem. Then the other thing is when it comes to governance, all of them, they are like the OAU. In fact, what has failed the OAU is sometimes congratulate, because they agreed. Now, if you read the first document, that they will never accept a member who has taken power by force. Look at their members. Majority of them are people who put on uniform to get power. All over, in South America, wherever, everywhere. So that one, they have left it. He was really, when he was explaining the military thing, that was one of them. They said we cannot accept anybody who takes power by barrel of the gun. What do? In every meeting, wherever they go, they are welcoming one of them. I know they are going to welcome these goons who took over power in Central Africa recently. They are going to welcome them here. Then the other thing with the NAM is that it is fighting a very big force. You see, NAM, and that's why I find doubt why there is a NAM which is different from G77. When you look at them, they are the same people with the same, almost the same objective, because G77, for it, the difference is that they encourage South-South relationship, whereby in trade, you trade with the South and in everything. But they are just like poor men who are contributing money to support a funeral. In most cases, those are the things poor people do, to contribute money to support a funeral, to contribute money to support a marriage. But what about the well-being of these people? Their people are living in abject poverty, including India that you hear about. There are so many people living in abject poverty. So when US just touches one thing on UNDP, they are all in arms. So they cannot have a voice. Now, lastly, to correct an impression that was created by my colleague there about the Security Council. I mean, yeah, the membership on the Security Council. I think in this NAM, which is happening on Monday 15th, one of the bigger agenda is for them to push for an African member, or at least a member of NAM, to be on the Security Council. The debate has been South Africa and others. So that is one of the debate. The other debate, the other thing that they are coming to do here is environmental protection. That is also
climate
an agenda.
change. Yeah.
Just look at the one who is going to take over chairmanship. How has the environmental protection been in Uganda, for instance? Let's not talk about other countries. It is pathetic. It is pathetic. We have had pronouncements. This is a country where very soon we are not going to have any wetland. And it is being taken when NEMA, which is a government agency, and the government of Uganda is watching. So for me, I really think that NAM is just a group of people who have similar problems, but they do not have solutions. And in most times, they keep deceiving themselves that they can be. He said that they cause countries to shiver. Really, if cats are going to make lions to shiver, then I don't know.
Thank you, Dr. Sar. We all know that for conferences of this nature to come to a country, there must be something good. And you keep saying Uganda is completely in a sorry state. You from the civil society, the shrinking civic space, human rights abuses. But we saw the conference of speakers here, NAM is here, G77 is here, and a couple of others. What good thing are they seeing in Uganda?
There's a time I attended the conference in the Central African Republic. At that time, a week before, Jean-Pierre Bemba, who is now a Minister of Defense, had just attempted a coup over a Reka Korose hotel where I was staying. Was that a sign of
In
stability?
Democratic Republic of Congo.
Yes. Was that a sign of stability? So hosting meetings, countries bid, countries offer, it costs money for a country, although there are benefits you can harvest if you are organized. So it's a cost on a country. You must bid, you must offer facilities. At the conference meetings, you must offer lunch to the delegates, although they can pick their accommodation and the dinner bills, but you will offer them lunch, you will offer meeting space, you will offer that facility, you will offer security, you will offer. So it is a cost on a nation. Afanda, which was saying that we have benefited from infrastructure in this NAM. We won the bid to host NAM in 2019. And there are 2 supplementary budgets that have been passed for NAM-related activities. One in April last year, and another one at the end of last year again. We have given money to Sudir. He's one of the big beneficiaries for NAM, because we know he never pays anything back to government. He has never paid a single dividend since we invested in his facility during Chogam. So maybe we can say Sudir has made money. We have infrastructures that have opened, but have been on construction plans for 5 years plus, like the Clock Tower flyovers over Clock Tower, partly funded by World Bank. We have the airport renovation project where we got a loan from China, and some of the corrections go direct to escrow account in Exim Bank. So yes, so these infrastructures that have opened in a week for arrivals of advanced teams for NAM, they have nothing to do with NAM. There has been a little fixture of lights on the express highway, the traffic lights. Of course, it is a scandal to have such a fast lane road running amidst the darkness, and there was a suit instituted to force UNRWA and the Ministry of Works to put lights on that road. So that has been fixed. We have had a little punching of potholes, because Kampala is also a capital city of potholes in Africa. Punching of potholes towards the roads going to Munyonyo. Me and you are in Ntinda, going to Namugongo, me and Dr. Ojambo here, there is nothing. So what are the benefits? So there is no infrastructure to talk about other than lights and punching of potholes and Munyonyo. Those are the only works purely dedicated to NAM in terms of infrastructure. So when you come to what can a country benefit from hosting, if you are organized, first of all, there will be foreign exchange money brought into the country.
True.
This week, the dollar exchange rate has gone up. That does not benefit me who has shillings. I buy dollar at a high rate and I get a little money, but it stabilizes the currency. So that is a benefit, immediate benefit for a country, forex earnings. When you look at tourism, if we are organizing, I hope that our visitors will get confidence to travel to Machon Falls, where we had an incidence of ADF. I hope now there is, the tourist was killed.
Maxwell Falls.
Queen Elizabeth.
Queen Elizabeth, sorry. Queen Elizabeth. So I hope that we have built confidence for people to go to the West. The other day, a car crashed with a tourist going to Kabare, and the tourist died. I hope also that will not scare, because that road was somehow damaged by heavy rains. We have several tours. So if people go and see these tourist features, they are earning, they are putting money in the economy, they are giving jobs to people who are in the tourist industry. That's another benefit. There's a bilateral summit on trade and investment, and the Minister of State for Investment says she targets to sign deals totaling to $100 million. Sometimes, of course, they sign air. When we were in Dubai, in the exhibition in Dubai, where we carried the whole government, how many investments have come here out of Dubai? The whole government was there for 3 weeks. How many new investments have come here? Maybe they will come 1 or 2, but even if you can sign several papers, because they had said they had signed so many, 1 or 2 sensible investors will come. So for me, that is not an achievement, the declaration of and the display of papers. We can also benefit largely from, of course, visibility as a country. If we are organized, then that visibility brings in business for the ordinary citizens.
Thank you, Doctor. Honorable Joseph, you see, one of the challenges in the world today is the conflict in Gaza, and tens of thousands of people have died. Say UPC was in power in Uganda today, how would the chairmanship of Honorable Joseph Ochieno help solve the problem in Gaza as chair of NAM?
Not help solve, but help contribute to minimizing these conflicts. As I said at the beginning, it's an important question. As I said at the beginning, that if the non-aligned movement aborters of the 60s and 80s added in their numbers to a newer generation of leaders across this continent and within the broader non-aligned movement, a family of membership, we would be having leaders who are slightly much more clear, who are slightly much more independent, and certainly would not be having poodles in the likes of Mr. Museveni, who are basically effectively sweatshop guys for Washington, which effectively are the people who are actually doing the killings, using Israel in Palestine. Don't forget that under the first Obote government, we had a very specific relationship with Israel and the Zionist group. Israel under the current Museveni was helped, meaning Zionist Israel, by the not Israel the state, it was helped to sneak into this region, including the Awichis of Foreign Affairs hosting these guys down here. Part of what these guys were doing the last 5 years were to diplomatically woo and buy into ourselves. And for Awich, who's a director at External Services, for NRA, you actually ought to be partly contributing to strategic thinking for your political organization. But of course, I know it will not go anywhere because Museveni will not take it. But strategically, as a nation state, we would be not hostile to Israel, but would be a harder partner, indicating the Zionist state, 5-10 years ago, that in as long as you change your positions on the Arab-Israeli, or basically on the question of Palestine, you are not necessarily going to be having a red carpet given to you, granted to you in Entebbe, like they've granted to him to this very difficult, terrible Prime Minister, Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, really a Zionist right-wing guy, in Kampala and in Nairobi. That is really generally what needed to be done. But you know what? Because Mr. Museveni is a poodle to the honors, it's a convenient new thing to be able to have Israel in, without actually strategically thinking. For the young Africans, I'm really, really, really privileged to have been a youngster in primary school, a youngster in secondary school, thinking global politics. So these things are actually very, very much embedded in myself. So I feel really sad about it. Because, Sarah, sometimes these days when you have these conversations, and I feel it, including some of our audience here, that, you dare mention Z to Israel, the land where Jesus comes from. People actually don't know that Christians, in many cases people fall like zombies, and I'm a decent Christian, I'm a minority in these places. So this is about global polity. 1.9%. Yeah, indeed. Global polity and reality. So a UPC presidency, a UPC leadership would be a conscious leadership in which the citizens of Uganda would not be traded, for power simply because you want to secure a state house for you, your children and children's children, including your brother and sister and son-in-law, but rather for the people of Uganda. So it would be a very different thing. That said, too, also, I must hail the ANC's government of South Africa for the position they actually took on taking Israel to court. It's an impressive thing, and it's an extremely courageous thing. And coming from South Africa is actually genuinely hailed. Those are the kind of leadership actually that we need as a people, as a continent, and indeed, really, that purpose the non-aligned movement will be taking. But you know, some of these guys are just like some people. You know, Robert was actually, you know, cheekily talking about which UPC. No, there's only one UPC. But you're right. There's certain individuals who are in UPC who are one thing in the morning and something else in the evening. Those are the kind of people who, in association with Mr. Museveni and others, are letting down this movement, the non-aligned movement, whose intention was genuinely very good, you know, set and designed to make sure that we save humanity, as actually Awich added much earlier, that were from the possibilities of NATO versus Warsaw Pact wars, which was nearly apparent, that we needed to be able to act in a manner in which we are free, that when we say no to America, we say no to Anglo-America with the free conscience.
So briefly, Honorable, do you then say that His Excellency Cyril Ramaphosa is the right guy for the presidency of South Africa?
No, he's an elected president of South Africa, no doubt about it. And on this particular, he's a friend, if you want to frame it like that. But I've been very critical about some of his roles in South Africa, some of his policy things. But I mean, I'm a Ugandan. But that said, on this very particular thing, it's an impressive thing by South Africa. By the way, it's an impressive thing by the African National Congress. That's the kind of leadership that we expected from them. That's the kind of leadership we expect of them, including the stature that they have. And for me, who's been lucky like Awich, and I'm sure some of my colleagues here, to relate with these people at personal level, we've actually advised that the tone ANC needed to have taken, you know, post-Mandela, with and post-Mandela, should have been one in which they claim the moral authority and the moral ground of this continent, and perhaps they would have helped us shake the world slightly more. On this one here, absolute credit to them.
Thank you. Just add something on the petition by South Africa. You know, the South African government did a live broadcast of the hearing, the first day hearing of the petition. That's powerful. But also they've received endorsements from Turkey, Malaysia, Jordan, Bolivia, Maldives, Namibia, Pakistan, Venezuela, Colombia, Brazil, and the Organization of Islamic Cooperation and the Arab League.
Not Uganda.
That's growing global support from the Nana. Uganda is nowhere. We hope that after the summit, they will add a clear voice and show direction on the interests. Nana-aligned, but for the independence of Palestine, they would fight for the rights of Palestinians that are being bombed every day. That's why I'm saying that the chairmanship of President Museveni, in the dying years of his presidency, is not likely to add a voice on NAM.
Thank you. Major, briefly as we come to the end of this show, President Museveni is chairman of the NAM for 3 years.
Two.
And we know in between there we have an election in this country. We don't know whether the president is coming back. Maybe you will tell us. But how does it look like for the NRM? How are you prepared for the chairmanship of 120 nations?
We are very prepared, and we shall navigate very successfully, and the world will benefit. But I also have to make first a comment. I will come to conclude on that about some comments made before. About ANC. ANC is really comrades, they're progressive. Today is the 10th. On the 14th, I'm flying to South Africa to meet ANC. I'll be flying to South Africa on just 3 days from today. And I will interface with them. We have been interfacing with them. They're a much older party than us, but we help to liberate them. You know, it is an irony that you are younger, but you liberate the older. Because we literally hosted them in Kaweta, trained them, armed them in thousands, took them back to fight at all risk, and they succeeded.
You built on the foundation that we have done, right?
Yeah, normally civilization works like that. You build on what you find. But we did it.
Yeah.
So they are an older party. We are younger, but we liberated them. So I'm going to be there. They're good people. Now, about Israel, that has been discussed, or Palestine for that case. NAM has a subcommittee which will pronounce itself. There's a subcommittee of NAM which is discussing about Israel, which my colleague prefers to use the word Zionist or Zionism, maybe for the avoidance of that for the viewers. The Zionist concept came in 1948 after the Second World War, when it was believed the Jews were killed. And when they were looking for a home, they wanted to bring them to Karamoja. By now, we would be having this problem in Uganda. But then they later zeroed on Mount Zion, which was in Israel. So it became a movement to collect Jews to come back to the land of Mount Zion. And that is why they call it the Zionist movement. But there is a committee, a subcommittee of NAM, which will discuss and make a pronouncement. So let us not preempt it. I also just want to mention in passing that NAM avoids the two blocks than faces it. In other words, if NATO was going to fight with Warsaw Pact, NAM was saying, we are not part of your fighting, you fight alone. So rather than looking at NAM like facing America or facing the East, look at NAM like avoiding the wars between the two. We are not going to fight your war alone. So this is a gist
How
of
does
NAM
it protect
because
its
of the
members?
military pact. That's why they said, NATO wants to fight Warsaw, and with their arsenal and nuclear, they want us to be used. No, we are not going there. Now, this brings me now to...
Major, before you leave that point, so how does NAM help the people of Palestine, since it doesn't want to fight or engage in anything that is in warlike?
No, in one of the NAM's provision, there's an area of human rights. And the instrument that governs, you can't look at it now, but in the instruments that governs NAM, there are provisions which are applicable to the current state of Palestine. So it is under those provisions of that instrument that governs NAM that the discussion will come from, either coming from a human rights perspective or even from a perspective which says that NAM should pronounce itself on topical issues of the globe. There's definitely a provision under the instrument where the debate will be anchored on. No worry about that.
Maybe just say something. You know, NAM beyond the Cold War was more grounded on the independence of Palestine. During the days of Arafat, NAM was more determined to see through the independence of Palestine. But now Awich is talking of the question of Palestine and the war in Gaza as a subsection, something hidden there.
Say subsection. If it was a subsection, they wouldn't have put a separate subcommittee to discuss. You know, the idea of a subcommittee is to have a detailed discussion on that, to thrash it out, because a plenary can't discuss something very well.
Maybe if I may ask you directly, today in the Palestine, we have two sorts of leadership, the leadership of Hamas and the leadership of Mahmoud Abbas. The NRM government, who do you work with?
We generally support the freedom of the Palestine, the two-state principle. Yes. And this we support it from the several resolutions which are engraved in organizations that we are. African Union made a position. United Nations made a position. And we are bound by those positions. So the internal governance of Palestine, we really don't enter into so much. But we know positions which are pronounced by AU, that is the two-state, Israel and the Arabs, and then pronounced in UN. But going to the internal governance of Hamas would amount to supporting which political party or which forces there. So we don't go into that detail. Now, about our chair in the 2 years, we definitely know we shall steer well, because President Museveni has the total grasp of geopolitics. President Museveni is more of a professor in world politics. He has seen it, he has known it, he has read it, he has participated in it. So he needs very little work from the aides who will write briefs. He can actually edit the briefs from the aides, and we shall say.
Thank you so much, Major. I hope you're a student of that professor. Thank you so much for joining us today. Honorable Joseph Ochieno, thank you so much for joining us today. Dr. Sarah Bireete, thank you so much for joining us today. And Dr. Robert Ojambo, thank you so much for joining us today. And
My
you,
pleasure.
our viewers, thank you so much for keeping with the Citizens Church on Civic Space TV. Special thanks to the Center for Constitutional Governance for making this possible, and other thanks to you, people behind the machines, Paul, Rashid, my producer, and everyone out there. From us, we say good evening, and may you have freedom always.